Hello and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Johan and I'm a Dutchie, and I want to learn about life and living in Australia by watching YouTube videos about life and living in Australia and reacting to it, because it's all the way down there, down under, and I'm afraid of flying. So this is for me, for now, the best way to learn more about life and living in Australia. And together with a growing community who gives me all kind of feedback, I learn every day more and more how it really is in Australia. And so we're going to take a look at the second part of Australians' hidden divide, the geography of southeastern Australia, because I did part 1 a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of you asked me, well, why don't you do part 2 too? Because it's a beautiful thing to look at. So today we're gonna do part 2. And without further ado, let's dive into the video.
Forests of Gippsland, explored the Gippsland Lakes and 90 Mile Beach, and ended at Port Phillip Bay, the flooded Ice Age landscape that became the geographic foundation of Melbourne. That first part was largely a story of water falling as snow in the mountains, water feeding forests and rivers, water gathering in lakes and wetlands, and water rising from the sea to flood ancient valleys. But west of Melbourne, the landscape changes. The story becomes older, drier, rougher, and more fractured. The bay and plain geography of Melbourne begins giving way to...
Wait. Back up. What is this? What's... Just a part to walk along in this, I don't know, river, lake. Looks right.
rougher and more fractured. The bay and plain...
Oh, it zooms out. Sorry, do it again.
The story becomes older, drier, rougher, and more fractured.
Yeah. It looks dead water from this point because the trees are... So it's kind of a salt lake, guessing something like. But at least it's beautiful to walk along and have here some view looking out to whatever the view may be. Wow.
The bay and plain geography of Melbourne begins giving way to ridges, gorges, volcanic plains, upland forests, fertile valleys, buried rivers, and old gold towns. Originally, this was going to be the second and final part of the journey, but when I wrote the full script for this second half of Victoria, it grew to 36 pages. And rather than force all of that into one enormous video, I've decided to split the rest of the series into part 3 and part 4. So this...
So there's even part 3 and a part 4? I'm not sure if we're going to do part 3 and part 4, because this man is doing a lot of research and has done a lot of filming and editing, etc. to make this. So I'm not planning to use his work in my advantage. So if you want to see part 3 and 4, then you actually have to go to his channel. The link will be in my description, so if you want to look at it, you can look for part 3 and 4. But I will cut it at part 2, because he did do so much work in it that I'm not going to feed off it, no.
This episode will focus on the first major transition west of Melbourne, the Gateway Inland. Bacchus Marsh, Werribee Gorge, the Lerderderg Ranges, Mount Macedon, the Central Uplands and the Victorian Goldfields, and then the Great Northern Plains of the Murray Basin. Before we continue, if you enjoy these deeper documentaries on Australia's landscapes, geology and natural history, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. It really...
You should, because he's done a lot of work.
Really helps support the work that goes into researching, writing and producing these longer videos. And
yeah, the link is in the description, so please show him some love.
I'd love to hear from you as well. If you enjoyed part 1, or if you want to see more geography documentaries like this covering other parts of Australia and the world, leave a comment below and let me know. Now let's leave Melbourne behind and begin at the gateway to the interior. This is the geography of southeastern Australia, part 2. Chapter 4, the gateway to the interior. Leaving Melbourne, a journey west does not
Melbourne. Wow. Straight as an arrow. From out the sky. I will never see this from out of the sky in real life. Oh no.
immediately enter open country. Instead, the landscape begins to change in stages. The city thins, the suburbs spread outward across low plains, the influence of Port Phillip Bay falls behind us, and ahead, the land begins rising into a more broken, complicated terrain. This is one of the most important geographic thresholds in Victoria, because west of Melbourne, several landscapes collide. The lower volcanic plains around the city, the river valleys and gorges of Bacchus Marsh, the wooded uplands of the Lerderderg and Wombat country, the dark mass of Mount Macedon, the basalt-covered country around Ballarat and Daylesford, and beyond them, the old gold-bearing uplands of central Victoria. This is not one simple region, it is a gateway from Melbourne into the interior, a gateway from bay and plain country into ridges, valleys, gorges, volcanic hills and goldfields. And to understand Western Victoria, this transition matters, because the goldfields did not appear in an empty landscape, they appeared in a very particular kind of country, a country of old rocks and uplifted terrain, one cut by creeks, gullies and rivers, one partly covered by younger lava flows, where elevation changed rainfall and climate, and a country where water determined movement, settlement, farming and mining. Before this region was a goldfield, it was a landscape, and that landscape begins almost immediately west of Melbourne. One of the clearest examples is Bacchus
What are these?
Marsh. At first glance, Bacchus Marsh looks like a fertile valley town on the western edge of Melbourne. It sits in a low basin surrounded by higher ground. Orchards and farmland occupy the flatter valley floor. Roads and transport routes pass through the area.
And all I can think about is, I would have lost cycle there and then going down there. Stop cycling. Watch the video. Amazing.
Compared to the surrounding uplands, the valley feels open, sheltered and usable. But geographically, Bacchus Marsh is more than a farming town. It marks the point where Melbourne's western fringe begins giving way to older, rougher country. To the east lie the lower plains, the city and Port Phillip Bay. To the west and north, the land rises into rugged uplands, dry forests, gorges and old gold country. And between them sits a landscape where rivers, ranges, farms, volcanic rocks and ancient glacial deposits all come together. The Werribee River cuts through this region in spectacular fashion. At Werribee Gorge, the river has carved a deep passage through resistant rock, exposing cliffs, steep slopes and rugged ridgelines only a short distance from the flatter valley country around Bacchus Marsh. This is important because it shows that central Victoria is not simply gentle inland farmland, it contains real relief. Gorges, escarpments, rocky ridges, confined valleys, and rivers capable of cutting deeply through old terrain. Nearby, the Lerderderg River creates an even wilder version of the same story. The Lerderderg Gorge is one of the most dramatic river-cut landscapes west of Melbourne. It slices through the uplands, creating steep forested slopes, rocky outcrops, dry ridges and a landscape that feels completely different from the open plains below. Together, Werribee Gorge and Lerderderg Gorge show how rivers have shaped the western edge of the central uplands.
So you can see how powerful streaming water is, that it can make the hardest rock go away with all this millennia and carving into a valley. It's the power of water.
They are not just scenic places. They are geographic corridors, they reveal the structure of the land, they expose older rocks and interrupt movement, and they guide roads, tracks and settlement. They mark the point where the landscape begins changing from Melbourne's bay and plain geography into the older, rougher interior. This matters for the goldfields story because goldfields are not only geological systems, they are drainage landscapes. Water shapes how gold is exposed, where it accumulates, where people search for it, and it shapes whether towns, farms and mining camps can survive. The same processes visible in the Werribee and Lerderderg Gorges operated across much of central Victoria. Rivers cut into uplands, creeks drained ridges, gullies concentrated heavy minerals, valleys guided movement, and over long periods, erosion helped reveal what was hidden in the rocks. The deeper story around Bacchus Marsh is even stranger. This region also preserves evidence of a much older glacial world. not the recent ice age that helped shape Port Phillip Bay, something far deeper in time. During the Permian period, when Australia was part of Gondwana and lay much closer to the South Pole, ice affected parts of what is now Victoria. Glaciers, meltwater streams, lakes and cold marine environments left deposits that still occur.
But is this Victoria? Or is this Antarctica?
Around the Bacchus Marsh region. This means that west of Melbourne, hidden among farms, roads, gorges and dry forests, the landscape preserves evidence of ancient ice. This is one of the most remarkable things about Victoria. Its modern geography is shaped by inherited landscapes, ancient oceans, ancient ice, ancient rivers, later uplift, younger volcanism and modern erosion. The land we see today is not the product of one event, it is a landscape assembled from many different worlds. The Bacchus Marsh and Werribee-Lerderderg region captures that perfectly. Fertile valley floors sit beside steep gorges. Modern farms sit above deep geological history. Old glacial deposits occur near river-cut landscapes. Volcanic plains lie nearby, and the uplands ahead lead directly into gold country. From here, the journey continues west and northwest.
Into the gold country. Is there still gold mining going on right now, in the last decades, for example, in Victoria, in the rivers and the creeks, or is it only the big mining companies that do, at certain points, their gold digging?
And the next major landmark is Mount Macedon. Rising northwest of Melbourne, Mount Macedon stands as one of the most recognisable features on the edge of the central uplands. It is not alpine country, it is not part of the high Victorian Alps, but it is high enough to matter. Its elevation allows it to capture more rainfall than the lower plains around it. Its slopes support cooler forests and more sheltered environments, and its position makes it feel like a gateway between Melbourne and inland Victoria. From a distance, Mount Macedon appears as a dark, elevated mass rising above surrounding country. It marks the beginning of a different Victoria. A Victoria of uplands, ridges, forests, river valleys, old towns and goldfields. This is where the
It's beautiful to look at. This is amazing. From up in the sky, but wow.
geography begins to feel less coastal and more interior. The landscape is no longer organised around Port Phillip Bay. It is organised by elevation, drainage, rainfall, old rocks and the routes that people use to move inland. And as we move further into central Victoria, the land becomes increasingly dissected. Creeks and gullies cut into hills, rivers separate ridges, small valleys open into farming country. Dry forests occupy poorer or rockier ground. Volcanic soil appear in some districts. Older sedimentary rocks remain exposed in others. This patchwork is essential to understanding the Victorian goldfields. The region is often remembered because of gold, but geographically it is defined by contrasts: old rock and young lava, dry forest and fertile farmland.
This is an amazing. Because the sun, it's a certain view of the sun that makes this look like gold. It's yeah, beautiful shot.
Ridges and valleys, basalt plains and deeply incised creeks, cool uplands and dry northern country. The gold rush happened because gold existed beneath the surface, but the goldfields became visible, usable and accessible because of the landscape above it. Old rock had to stand high enough to be eroded. Creeks had to cut into them, gullies had to collect the heavy material, rivers had to move sediment, and people needed water, access, and enough usable land to build camps, towns, and supply routes. This is why the Victorian goldfields belong in a geography documentary, not because gold alone is interesting, but because goldfields are landscapes produced by the interaction of rock, relief, water, erosion, and people. Around Ballarat, this becomes especially clear. Ballarat sits on elevated country. This helps explain why it feels different from Melbourne, Geelong, or the Northern Plains. Its climate is shaped not simply by distance from the coast, but by height. Cold air settles into low areas, frosts are common, winters can feel harsh, and the open elevated character of the land gives Ballarat a distinctly inland upland identity. This elevation influenced everything. It shaped vegetation, farming, water supply, roads, and mining, and it shaped the way the town developed.
Yep. Because of the high elevation. Yeah. Colder up there. More windy.
The country around Ballarat is also strongly influenced by volcanism. Basalt flows spread across parts of the region, covering older landscapes in younger volcanic rock. In some places, lava buried ancient river valleys. Those buried valleys later became important because they preserved old gravels beneath basalt. But even beyond gold mining, the volcanic rocks shaped everyday geography. Basalt weathers into fertile soils. Those soils help support agriculture and grazing. So the same volcanic activity that buried parts of the ancient landscape also helped create productive farmland. This is one of
Yeah, because lava is very fertile ground. Once it cools down, that's why it's so big. And in Italy with all its grapes.
the key geographic patterns of central and western Victoria. Volcanic country and gold country are not completely separate. They overlap. They sit beside each other and they influence each other. Old folded rocks provided the gold-bearing terrain.
Wow.
Younger lava flows covered some areas and enriched others. Rivers then cut, exposed, buried and reworked the landscape. The result is a complex patchwork of mining districts, farms, forests, reservoirs and towns. Daylesford and Hepburn show another version of this. This area sits within cool, elevated country, influenced by volcanic activity, groundwater movement and mineral springs.
Looks great. Back up. Wow. What an area to live in. What an area to live in.
Country, influenced by volcanic activity, groundwater movement and mineral springs. Its identity is not only mining, it is also springs, tourism, forests, farms and upland climate. Again, geography shapes human identity. One town becomes known for gold, another for mineral springs, another for agriculture, another for forests or reservoirs, and often those identities are rooted in the physical landscape. Castlemaine occupies a different kind of goldfields geography. It sits among creek systems, dry ridges and old diggings. The surrounding country feels rugged, exposed and deeply tied to drainage. Creeks and gullies were central to how people moved through the landscape and where alluvial gold accumulated. This was not a flat, uniform field. It was a dissected upland landscape where the shape of the land mattered. Further north toward Bendigo, the geography changes again. The climate becomes drier.
Learning more and more places in Australia from the video of yesterday.
The forests become more open. The hills are lower and more subdued. Box ironbark woodlands dominate much of the region. The country feels warmer, drier, and more inland. Bendigo was not simply another version of Ballarat. It occupied a drier northern upland environment, closer to the transition toward the Murray Basin. This changed everything. Water became more limited, vegetation changed, agriculture changed, and settlement patterns changed as well. Mining required different approaches to water supply and infrastructure. This is one of the most important geographic differences between Victoria's goldfields. Ballarat, Bendigo, Castlemaine and Daylesford were connected by gold, but they were not identical landscapes. Ballarat was elevated, cooler, and strongly associated with volcanic cover and buried drainage systems. Bendigo was drier, more open and closer to the northern plains. Castlemaine was rugged, dissected, and strongly tied to creek and gully systems. Daylesford sat in cooler volcanic uplands, shaped by springs, forests, and elevated terrain. Each goldfield had its own geography, its own climate, its own drainage, its own relationship with water, and its own connection to farming, transport, and settlement. The broader region also sits across major drainage divides. This is crucial. Some rivers and creeks drain south toward Port Phillip Bay. Others drain north toward the Murray system. Around Bacchus Marsh, the Werribee River and the Lerderderg River drain south.
I'm looking at this and try to get it. If this is because it goes a river all the way down here too, and down here and then down. Is this the highest point, for example? Is this the well? Because it goes down here, or is this higher? No, this could not be. So looks like this is the high point, and from this point, a lot of rivers go down all directions.
And east toward Port Phillip Bay. Further east, the Maribyrnong system, including Jackson's Creek and Deep Creek, also carries water toward Melbourne and the Bay. Further southwest, the Moorabool River flows toward the Barwon system near Geelong. And around Ballarat, the Arrowee Creek becomes part of the Lee River, which eventually joins the Barwon River and flows toward the southern coast. But on the other side of the divide, the rivers turn inland. The Campaspe River rises near the Macedon and Woodend region, then flows north through Kyneton, Lake Epilogue, and toward the Murray River near Echuca. The Coliban River rises in the higher country around Trentham and Lionville before joining the Campaspe system. The Loddon River also begins in the Central Highlands near the Daylesford
I was wrong.
and Trentham region, then flows north through central Victoria toward the Murray Basin. Creeks around Creswick, Clunes and Maryborough feed into systems such as the Tullaroop Creek and the Loddon River. Further west, the Avoca River rises near the Pyrenees and flows north across dry inland country, often ending not as a single clear river mouth, but in wetlands and lake country near the lower Murray Basin. Even Bendigo has its own version of this pattern. Bendigo Creek carries water northward away from the goldfield, through the drier country north of the city, toward the Campaspe system and the broader Murray Basin. This makes central Victoria a hinge between two drainage worlds. The rivers do more than move water. They organise the landscape, define valleys, separate ridges, influence roads. They determine where towns can grow, and they shape agricultural districts. And historically, they determined where alluvial gold could accumulate. The gold rush followed the shape of the land. Prospectors moved along creeks and gullies. Tracks developed between diggings. Towns formed where water, access and mineral wealth intersected. Farms expanded where soils were suitable. Forests remained where country was too rugged, dry or poor for intensive agriculture. Railways and roads later connected these upland towns back to Melbourne and the ports. The result was a distinctive human geography laid over a physical one. Central Victoria became a network of inland towns. Ballarat, Bendigo, Castlemaine, Maldon, Clunes, Daylesford, Creswick, Kyneton, Woodend, Bacchus Marsh. Each occupies a particular position within a landscape. Some sit near old diggings, river valleys, volcanic plains, transport corridors, the edge of agricultural land, and some at the threshold between Melbourne and the interior. Together they form one of the most recognisable inland landscapes in Australia, a landscape of old main streets, dry forests, open paddocks.
That's all I can say. I need to react to this, but wow.
Reservoirs, stone buildings, mine waste, volcanic hills, fertile valleys and winding roads through ridges and gullies. By the time we leave this region, the geography of Victoria has changed completely. Melbourne and Port Phillip Bay are behind us. The wet eastern forests feel distant. The landscape is now older, drier, more elevated and more fractured. But as we continue north and northwest, the landscape begins to fall away. The ridges soften, the valleys broaden, the rivers become more important than the hills, and the land opens into one of the great lowland regions of southeastern Australia. This is where central Victoria begins draining toward the Murray, where creeks and rivers leaving the goldfields flow into wider plains, where water spreads across flatter country instead of cutting through steep gorges, and where the geography changes from upland ridges and gold-bearing valleys into floodplains, irrigation districts, wetlands, river red gum forests and ancient lake country. The next part of Victoria's story is not shaped by gold, and not yet by volcanoes. It is shaped by rivers,
not yet by volcanoes.
sediment, floods, and by water moving slowly across low ground, and by the vast inland basin that receives much of the water from the mountains and uplands to the south, the Murray Basin. So from the central uplands and the goldfields, our journey now turns north.
Yeah, what I don't see is what we have, I would say, in the Netherlands, but almost in all of Europe, is that the rivers are widened and used as a means of transport by inland ships who transport goods from the inland to the coastline, and in this case from inland of Victoria to Melbourne, to be transported off into foreign countries in those days. So not now, but in those days, instead of a train or something, or horse and carriage. So I don't see it. That's what we did over here in Europe. We made this kind of rivers, like I see this one here, more widened so we can use it for ships to transport goods over the water. That's what I don't see here. So,
Basin. So from the central uplands and the goldfields, our journey now turns north, toward the great river plains of Victoria. Chapter 5. The Great Northern Plains. North of the Central Highlands, Victoria changes character completely. The uplands fade behind us, the sharpness of ridges and valleys softens, the land begins to flatten, and eventually the landscape opens into broad plains that stretch toward the Murray River. This is northern Victoria, a region shaped less by mountains than by rivers, less by cliffs than by floodplains, less by elevation than by water moving slowly across low country. This is the southern edge of the Murray Basin, and to understand this landscape we need to think differently. In the mountains, geography is obvious. Peaks rise, valleys fall, streams rush downhill, but on the plains, geography becomes subtle. A few meters of elevation can determine where water flows. A slight rise can separate one drainage system from another. A shallow depression can become a wetland. A low ridge can mark the edge of an ancient river course. The northern plains may appear flat, but they are full of hidden structure. Over millions of years, rivers flowing from the Great Dividing Range carried sediment northward. Sand, silt, and clay were transported out of the highlands and deposited across the basin. Floods spread across lowlands. Channels shifted. Rivers abandoned old courses and carved new ones. Wetlands formed and disappeared. Ancient lakes expanded and contracted. Layer by layer, the plains were built. The Murray Basin itself is enormous. It extends across parts of Victoria, New South Wales, and South Australia. For Victoria, it forms much of the state's northern and northwestern geography. It is the reason the north looks so different from the east. It is the reason broad agricultural districts exist across places like Shepparton, Echuca, Swan Hill, and Mildura. And it is the reason water has always been a defining issue of northern Victoria. At the heart of this region is the Murray River. The Murray is Australia's longest river. For much of its course, it forms Victoria's northern boundary. Its presence is so important that the map of Victoria itself is partly drawn by water. The state's northern edge follows the winding path of a river born far away in the Australian Alps. This is one of the great connections in Victoria's geography. The mountains of the east create water. That water flows north and west, and eventually it defines the boundary of the state. The Murray is not just a line on a map, it is an ecological system. A transport route, cultural landscape, water supply,
So it is a transport route. Okay.
political boundary, and an agricultural lifeline. Along its floodplain grow river red gum forests. These trees are perfectly adapted to periodic flooding. Their roots reach into floodplain soils. Their survival depends on the rhythm of water. In wet years, the river spreads across low country, replenishing wetlands and forests. In dry years, the floodplain contracts. The entire ecosystem responds to the availability of water. Tributaries from Victoria feed into the Murray system. The Goulburn River is one of the most significant. It drains high country and central Victorian catchments before flowing north through one of the state's most important agricultural regions. The Campaspe River flows north from central Victoria. The Loddon drains country further west. The Ovens and Kiewa bring water out of the northeast. Together, these rivers connect the mountains to the plains. They carry not only water, but sediment, nutrients, and history. Human settlement followed these rivers. Towns formed near crossings, floodplains, and irrigation opportunities. Agriculture
Yep, if there's sweet water, people live near it.
expanded where water could be controlled and distributed. Irrigation transformed large areas of northern Victoria. Dairying, fruit growing, cropping, and horticulture became tied to river systems and water infrastructure. This is geography converted into economy. But the northern plains also contain a deeper story, a story of ancient lakes. One of the most important was Lake Bungunya. Millions of years ago, parts of the Murray Basin were occupied by an enormous freshwater lake system. Lake Bungunya stretched across large areas of southeastern Australia. It formed when drainage through the Murray system was disrupted, allowing water to pond across the basin. For a time, parts of what are now river plains and drylands were covered by a vast inland lake. Eventually the lake drained, rivers reorganised, sediments remained, and the landscape continued evolving. The lake is gone, but its legacy helps explain parts of the basin's sediments, soils, and landforms. This is a
Did I not see a video coming up about making this lake reappear for agriculture purposes and getting more water into the outback? Or was that a different lake?
legacy helps explain inland lake. Parts of what are now river plains and drylands were covered by a vast inland lake. Eventually the lake drained, rivers reorganised, sediments remained, and the landscape continued evolving. The lake is gone, but its legacy helps explain parts of the basin's sediments, soils, and landforms. This is a recurring theme in Victoria. Many landscapes that appear ordinary are actually the remains of vanished worlds. A dry plain may have once been a lake floor, a bay may have once been a valley, a dune field may record an ancient dry climate, a gentle hill may hide folded marine sediments filled with gold. Northern Victoria is filled with these hidden stories. It is not as visually dramatic as the Alps or the coast, but geographically it is one of the most important regions in the state, because it connects Victoria to the wider Murray-Darling Basin. And the Murray-Darling Basin connects Victoria to one of the great environmental and agricultural systems of Australia. By the end of this part of the journey, Victoria has changed dramatically. We began at the edge of Melbourne, where the bay and plain geography of the city gives way to older, rougher, inland country. From there we moved west into Bacchus Marsh, a fertile valley sitting between river gorges, rugged uplands, volcanic landscapes, and evidence of a much older glacial world. We followed the Werribee and Lerderderg rivers as they cut through the landscape, exposing the harder country that lies beyond the city. We looked toward Mount Macedon, an ancient explosive volcano and one of the great landmarks on the edge of the central uplands. And then we entered the Victorian goldfields, not simply as a mining region, but as a landscape. A place shaped by ridges, gullies, dry forests, drainage divides, volcanic cover, water supply, inland settlement, and old fractured rocks standing high enough to be eroded. This is what makes the goldfields so important to Victoria's geography. They are not just places where gold was found. They are places where the shape of the land helped determine where people moved, where towns grew, where farms expanded, where roads and railways developed, and where one of the greatest gold rushes in history unfolded. Then the journey turned north, away from the broken uplands and into the broad lowland plains of northern Victoria, the Murray Basin, the Murray River, the floodplains, wetlands, irrigation districts, river red gum forests and ancient lake country that shaped the northern edge of the state. Here, the geography changed again. The hills softened, the valleys widened, the rivers slowed, and water became the dominant force. Not the coastal water that flooded Port Phillip Bay, and not the mountain water falling as snow in the Alps, but inland water. Water moving across plains, spreading into wetlands, feeding farms, towns and forests, and water connecting Victoria to the much larger Murray-Darling Basin. So part 2 has been a journey from the edge of Melbourne into inland Victoria, from gorges to goldfields, from uplands to river plains, from fractured old rocks to broad low country, and from the landscapes that help reveal Victoria's gold, to the rivers and floodplains that help sustain life across the north. But Victoria still has more landscapes to reveal, because in part 3 we turn west again, into one of the strangest and most distinctive regions in the state, the volcanic plains, a vast volcanic landscape stretching from Melbourne and Geelong across western Victoria, a region of basalt plains, lava flows, scoria cones, crater lakes, fertile soils, buried valleys and some of the youngest volcanoes on the Australian mainland. Then we continue toward one of the great landmarks of western Victoria, the Grampians, a landscape of sandstone ridges, cliffs, valleys and deep cultural history rising sharply from the surrounding plains. And after that, in part 4, we'll complete the journey through the dry mallee, the wet forests of the Otway Ranges, and the storm-battered cliffs of the shipwrecked coast, where the Southern Ocean continues to carve away the edge of the continent. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps support these longer documentaries and allows me to keep creating deep dives into Australia's landscapes, geology and natural history. And let me know in the comments if you're enjoying this geography series. Because if people want to see more of this, I'd love to continue the journey across other parts of Australia. I'll see you in part 3.
Yeah, he's asking for it, and he's right. If you want to know more about this and he's keep on making this, go to his channel and give a comment and let him know that it's really, really nice. I see there are 109 reactions to this, so it is a good idea. See a lot of fantastic used to live in this, so people recognizing stuff. Another great video. So he's doing great work. So go over to his channel, like and subscribe, and give the man some love for the things that he is making. Really good videos. This is well researched and good filmed. I don't know if he made all the films himself with a drone or something like, but he really knows his stuff. It's good. It's a good video. Again, I learned a lot. I've seen a lot of beautiful things of Victoria, Southeast Australia, I have to say, and it is marvelous. It's great. Wow. And if you liked my video reacting to, then press like. And if you want to see more of my videos reacting to Australia, then this is a good place to start with. And otherwise, it would be really appreciated if you hit the subscribe button or buy me a coffee. See you in the next Australian video.